Okay, so next we have Nathan Cloutier, but after Nathan Cloutier is Jane Doe 1, and we're asked to make an announcement that CTN is taping the proceedings, and your face will appear on the video if you're going to testify, so you should just be aware of that before you agree to come down.
I've got child care, and I've got to go. I really wanted to testify. I would be happy if you switch to me on next. But I really have to leave. I've got a child at home. I've got to go.
What's your name, sir? Hang on a second. What number are you, sir?
I'm 35, but there's people that have been arranged to let me speak next after this fellow.
Well, if they'll switch with you.
If he will switch with me.
I'd be happy to delay one person. That's fine, yeah.
Well, are you Keith Harnon? Okay. So, Mr. Harnon, we'll put you in under this section.
I'm sorry. I've tried to arrange the problems of child care at home. Anyone who has children knows what that's like. There are people operating in the court system today who've never had children, who have no business operating in this court system.
Sir, did you submit any written testimony for us to review?
No, but you can get it
Okay.
off my website. It's
Well,
an
you can-
81-page document titled A Life Sentence about the
Okay.
problems of the Connecticut courts.
All right. Thank you. If you want to submit it, you can submit it to our email address.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
I published this in May of last year. Let's start with something really clear. All this talk about in the best interest of the child. There is no operating in the best interest of the child in the state of Connecticut. The courts in the state of Connecticut are turned into private profit-based system of extortion and criminal racketeering that enriches lawyers, judges, doctors, and psychologists. Financial benefits drive lawyers and judges to create war in divorce court. The system promotes separating children from parents and forcing them into foster care. In the end, children are being trafficked to their abusers. And we're talking about sex violations that are very easy to document and support in certain cases. I've examined over 25 cases here. I've interviewed over and over for this. You need to talk to and understand what's really happening in the courts in Connecticut. And to write it off as saying, well, this balances that out there and here is Miss Dornfield, is completely unconscionable. There's no balancing it out. Let's look at some specifics. From April 2010, GAL Maureen Murphy billed on Sonny Kelly's case in Liberty versus Liberty at the rate of $300 an hour. And as time went on, Murphy became more and more enmeshed in the day-to-day business of, quote, parenting Max Liberty, who was being sexually abused by his father. In this case, there was no, the GAL did not put in only 1 hour of time with the kid. She spent hours and hours and hours, as much as she could, to rack up a bill of, in the end, $83,000, $83,100 for 277 hours of what amounts to interference and harassment of the mother. It's not only happening to mothers, it's happening to fathers. It's happening to everyone in the court system who's sucked into this vortex. From the very beginning to the bitter final decision, Attorney Maureen Murphy took the father's side in this case. She appears in many other cases. In some cases, she appears as the lawyer representing a guardian ad litem. This is before she became a judge, by the way. And when she did become a judge, at her hearing, people brought forward the complaints about Maureen Murphy, and they were written off, even in the press, as people went back and looked at the court records, and the court records have been actually doctored. The media didn't point this out. Nobody pointed it out to the media. So the guardian ad litem is doctoring court records, working in collusion with judges to extort entire financial fortunes from parents, liquidate children's accounts, what do you call them? Trust funds, to liquidate retirement accounts, to absolutely destroy people's lives, not to stop the process and bring them back together. In Tittle versus Tittle, in Waterbury Court, Judge Robert Risha forced Susan Skip to sign over a $41,000 retirement account, which is protected from garnishment. These examples are over and over and over in this document, and I invite you to look at it, and I really wish I could go into it. Another problem is the...
Sir, can you just wrap up? Because
yeah, I'll wrap up by pointing out that the other people that extort profoundly beyond the judges are the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the guardian ad litems, and the special appointed court visitation supervisors. And some of these visitation supervisors actually have criminal records. They've gotten away with major criminal operations. They're not even documented in the state, and they're picked by the guardian ad litem who's been picked by the judge.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for this gentleman? Representative Gonzalez.
Thank you. And thank you for coming. I know that you're coming all the way from Boston, and I know that you was here a couple of years ago. And I think that at the time that you was here, I learned a lot from what was going on. Do you, as far as I know, you interview a lot of females. How long? Because in the beginning, when you hear about these cases, sometimes we can't believe that this is going on. How long it took you, to find out what really was going on, to believe that this was going on?
The first case I ever heard about was Liberty versus Liberty, and I heard about it because a friend I was working with was coming back and forth from Massachusetts to Connecticut, where she was living with the parent, Sonny Kelly, and Max was being abused by the father. And I heard about this over 3 or 4 years ago. And for 2 years, I completely denied the fact that I was hearing that this child was being raped by his father, and the court was actually sending the kid back to the father. I refused to accept that. The idea of sexual violence of a child like that by the father being supported by the court terrified me. And then finally, as an international human rights investigator and a journalist, I couldn't ignore this story. I went to prove that it was not true. I just couldn't believe that this was happening to the mother. So that was over 4 years ago, and I spent 2 years listening to these complaints, and then finally I spent 5 months investigating them, where I then looked at Liberty versus Liberty, Baccia versus Debeck, Buggy versus Buggy, Tittle versus Tittle, Zafiro versus Zafiro, Foley versus Foley, D'Angelo versus D'Angelo, Janik versus Janik, Tauk versus Tauk, Gill versus Gill. I mean, Thomas Foley, your soon-to-be governor, was appointed to a special commission, and this is the kind of hand-washing and money laundering that's going on. He was appointed to a special commission by Governor Rowland to oversee family court disputes at the same time as he was persecuting his own wife and child in the court system.
Can you tell me a little bit about the supervised visit, how that works, and who recommends the supervised visit and why?
In the case of Liberty versus Liberty,
Yes.
the supervised visitation was forced on the mother because every time she brought forward evidence of Max being raped by his father, that evidence was suppressed by the opposing lawyer, who went about proving that she was suffering from something called parental alienation syndrome. And that, in fact, is a discredited psychobabble theory that should not be entered into the court system in any way whatsoever. The father in this case was raping the child. She would produce evidence of that. She didn't say, my son's being raped by the father. She said, there's something wrong with my son. She went to the pediatrician. She went to the psychologist. She went to the therapist. She went to the other therapist. Everybody sent her to the Yale sex abuse clinic. It went round and round and round, and they got more and more of these people involved until finally the court forced her to have a visitation supervisor, the N.J. Sarno and Company, alias Sicanolfi, alias Sicanolfi, alias Sicanolti. Who is this guy, N.J. Sicanolti, who's
Here.
been in court
Sir.
in Florida?
Sir.
Keith.
Mr.
Sir.
Harmon,
He
please
bought
address
a
the task
condominium
force.
on the money that he charged this
Sir,
woman.
address the task force,
Here,
please,
here,
or you'll be
leave.
asked to leave.
He
Thank you.
bought a condominium on the money that he charged this woman. Something like $80,000. And she hasn't seen her son for over a year. This is criminal. The woman is not an alcoholic. She's never hurt her son. She hasn't seen him in over a year. That is the destruction of an entire life.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other
Thank
questions?
you.
You
Thank
do that to my son, and I will put a bullet
Thank
through
you.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Harmon,
Thank
you're now
you.
done.
It's time that people spoke up for the truth.
Mr. Harmon,
Sir,
thank you.
thank
You're
you.
excused. I'm having some difficulty with why it is so difficult for people to understand not to be cheerleaders here. So please restrain yourselves.
And if I
It's
may,
not that hard a concept.
if I may, through the chairs, when we're talking about cases that involve children with rape issues and private issues, maybe we could have some discretion. And I understand it's a public hearing. Have some discretion about putting names on the record. There are children involved in these cases, and it affects their lives.
Representative Gonzalez, you had a comment about Jane Doe 1. Is she going to, knowing the,
Oh, he was next, and then it's Jane Doe.
no, you switched your position with this gentleman.
That's okay. He's
All right, fine. That's fine. I thought they said they switched.